We go to United States Senator Tom Cotton, still on baby watch, I assume. And Senator Cotton, good luck this week. I assume this is the week that you become a dad, so that's terrific.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, I would not be on with you if I had a newborn, so I do not have a newborn. My wife is due on Thursday and won't be any later than probably this time next week if it hasn't happened by then.
Well, you'll be in our prayers and thoughts all week. But let me ask you before you get into full-born baby duty, is it a good thing if the Corker bill passes? And I'll tell you the background. I talked about this with Senator Sass last week. If it passes and you guys don't end up rebuking the president's deal, does that add to the legitimacy of the deal? What's Tom Cotton say?
No, Hugh, that does not add to the legitimacy of what would be a very bad deal based on the president's own proposals. And Senator Corker, Senator Menendez bills do have some real improvements to the status quo on them. They'll stop the president from delaying sanctions or lifting sanctions for anywhere from 30 to 52 days, so Congress can have a chance to review and vote on the proposed deal. And second, they'll require the president, whoever he or she may be after this president, in addition to this president, to recertify compliance with the deal every 90 days, which, if there is a deal, will give the next president a regular benchmark to modify its terms if Iran is cheating or if it's not in our national security interest. But the real issue, Hugh, is that there's no deal. There's no framework. We saw this just again last week with Iran's senior leadership, once again saying that they did not agree to any deal that does not lift sanctions immediately. And startlingly, President Obama was talking on Friday at a press conference about creative ways in which we could give in to Iran even on that point. So I would not concede that, one, we're going to have a deal based on the words of the leaders of Iran, or two, that you might not see a big and bipartisan vote against it if the president continues to make dangerous concession after dangerous concession, like lifting the sanctions immediately or acquiescing in the lack of anytime, anywhere inspections.
Now, Senator Cotton, the big headline this afternoon is that the USS Theodore Roosevelt is steaming towards the coast of Yemen, where Iranian warships are steaming in support of their Houthi rebels. I cannot imagine that the president would allow a confrontation no matter what Iran does, given what he's done over the last 6 months. Can you?
I would certainly hope not, Hugh. We should not allow Iran to rearm the Houthi rebels in Yemen, particularly while our allies are running their own campaign against that insurgency, nor should we allow Iran to take any provocative steps like militarizing or even mining the Mandeb Strait or the Gulf of Aden, through which so much global commerce and U.S. naval ships pass through. So this is, about as red as a red line that can be drawn in international affairs, open lines of sea communications. And I certainly hope the president will defend those open sea lines.
Now, Tom Cotton, Max Fisher is no fan of yours, and I'm no fan of Max's, but he did have an interview with Mike Doran, and Mike is a very solid guy on this stuff, where he ended up asking, very last question, is the best argument for Iran deal that there is no alternative to an Iran deal? And Doran said, no, that's not the best argument. He answered the right way. But what level of worry is there over the use of force when in the past America's always been able to calibrate force vis-a-vis Iraq, vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis everyone? There was the tanker war. There was Operation Desert Fox. Why is it this time that so many Americans are unwilling to entertain some limited use of force to back up our opposition to the Iranian nuclear program?
Well, Hugh, I would say a lot of elites in Washington don't want to entertain it. The Americans with whom I speak regularly from Arkansas realize that you have to have a credible threat of force against Iran if you want to get a good bargain out of Iran on their nuclear program. The president himself has said for years that he does not bluff and that he is willing to take military action against Iran. Now, lately, he's been posing a false choice, which is what he always accuses his opponents of doing, in making people believe it's either this deal that he's proposed or something like 150,000 mechanized soldiers on the ground, as we saw in Iraq over the last 10 years. I assume that that's not what he's meant for the last 5 or 6 years when he talks about a credible threat of force against Iran. I assume that what he means is something like Operation Desert Fox against Iraq in 1998, or the air campaign against Kosovo, or the tanker wars in 1987 and 1988. Limited, targeted action against Iran's nuclear facilities, against their command and control facilities, against their air defense facilities, and so forth. I assume that's what he's meant. That's certainly what I always took him to mean. If he meant 150,000 heavy mechanized troops for the last 6 years he was talking about it, he should have made that clear.
I'm trying to figure out, though, whether or not the difference this time between Kosovo, the tanker war, Operation Desert Fox, and the reluctance to even talk about it now is the fear of Iran. That, in fact, Americans are afraid that Iran can launch a more powerful reprisal against America than either Iraq and certainly the Kosovar antagonists or Iran in 1986, 87, 88.
I think the president simply doesn't want to take military action at all. I mean, he threatened military action against Syria if they use chemical weapons against their own people. They used chemical weapons, and then he grabbed the first lifeline he could find to not take military action. Most Arkansans with whom I speak know that we might have to take military action. The president himself, again, is his own worst witness on this question. Just a couple weekends ago, he, in almost mocking tones, said we spend $600 billion on our military and Iran spends $30 billion in their military. I think a reasonable inference from that statement is that we could destroy Iran's nuclear facilities and command and control facilities and air defense facilities in relatively short order. And I would point out that Ehud Barak, the former prime minister and defense minister of Israel, and a longtime political adversary of Benjamin Netanyahu, has said it wouldn't even take days. He said it would take a fraction of a night for the United States military to wage an effective air and naval bombing campaign against Iran.
Wow. So, Senator Cotton, I want to make sure people are clear. You support the Corker deal, and you would urge people who are worried about Iran to support the Corker deal.
I intend to vote for the Corker-Menendez legislation as it came out of committee last week, barring any kind of legislation that waters it down or undermine its core purpose. I suspect you might see other amendments that might strengthen it. So I'll reserve final judgment, but as it came out of committee, I think it does advance an important principle that Congress needs time to review and the president shouldn't be able to waive the sanctions immediately. But in the end, we need to stop the deal that's been proposed. The deal that's been proposed is dangerous for America, and it's dangerous for global security.
And that's going to be July, right? That's when we're going to have... The
Menendez bill would just have a vote after the fact. Between now and the end of June, we have to change the terms of the debate and get a better deal out of Iran.
Well said, Tom Cotton. Always a pleasure, Senator. Good luck this week. We'll talk to you, if not next week, then the week thereafter when you're a new dad. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt.